What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TOJ Talks. I'm your host, Will Parkinson, at WillPod11 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Will Parkinson F on YouTube. Got to roll through the Rolodex there of handles. Another episode. I don't know. It's when this episode comes out Saturday morning. We'll be about 4.5, 5 days out from the NFL draft. It's incredibly exciting. I'm so happy it's finally here because we have done a million mock drafts. We've talked about these prospects over and over. We're having Jade Daniels demanding to go to when he went to Commanders. There's a bunch of crap going on. We know it's smokescreen season. No better person to have on Leger Douzable, Sirius XM, CBS, doing a bunch of stuff with the Jets, obviously as well. Leger, how we doing, man?
I'm good, Will. How about yourself? I'm like you, man. It's exciting time, right? Literally just finished my last two mock drafts, but I actually have to do one more live for CBS Sports. So it's getting to that point, right, where you try to mix things up on the draft board. And the funny thing is, none of us know what we're talking about, right? Because it's always chaotic on draft day. Like I think if people kind of assume we know what's happening with number one and have a almost clear-cut view of what's going to happen at two, but then after that, nobody knows what's going to happen. So, I'm always interested to see, how chaotic it can actually get during the NFL draft.
Yeah, no, I'm. It's fun. It's funny. I'm just for people who are listening. Obviously, want to appreciate this. Leger's got a sick background, not as cool as mine, but probably more prestigious than mine. Probably more prestigious. Nothing will beat Bill Belichick's background. Hops on the McAfee show out of nowhere. Pretty cool. Excited to hear him doing the draft. This is so random. We don't talk about this, but there was like a zillion Super Bowl trophies behind him. Like, that is the biggest flex. This guy
flex on him.
That's a menace. Kraft leaks a bunch of shit about him. He's like, here, touch my Super Bowls, buddy.
Pretty much.
But I want to talk a little bit about, we've talked a lot of what should the Jets do at 10. And Joe Douglas spoke earlier this afternoon. We're recording this on Friday about, hey, there's 10 players we could take in the first round, essentially, which is classic GM speak because they picked 10th. He also mentioned, hey, maybe we'd be interested in trading up, trading back. It kind of feels like them just sticking at 10 is probably not as likely as maybe we thought a couple weeks ago. I feel like there is some steam to them trading up, especially from one of those three receivers. There's also some good value and depth in the offensive line and receiver classes, for that matter, after picks like 15, 16. You start to get in. There's some depth there. So what do you make of this whole trade up, trade back, stay at 10? Where's your head at? Is it just based on what the board's going to look like on Thursday night?
So it's so interesting that you said that because we actually had a segment for the Jets in regards to trade up or trade down. That's literally what the segment was called. And I think for the Jets, the draft begins at pick 7, right? Tennessee Titans. One would assume, because they did pay a lot of money to Calvin Ridley, that they would try to rectify that offensive line for their quarterback, Will Levis, right? Kind of a turnstile key at that offensive line position, left tackle, right tackle. They have Petit Frere who can play left and right. I think they're probably, if Joe Alt is on the board, I think they're going to run and turn that card in for Joe Alt or even Olufashinu. Like either one of those guys are on the board. I think they're going to run up and turn that card in to really rectify that issue for the offensive line. So that's where I think it gets interesting for the Jets, depending on how the draft board actually falls, because you kind of alluded to it perfectly, Will. I think the Jets should be a little aggressive and try to jump Chicago. I don't see the Atlanta Falcons taking a pass catcher, right? Because they took one 2 years ago in Drake London. They signed Darnell Mooney, and they also traded for Rondale Moore. And they still have Kyle Pitts, who they have yet to get the maximum talent out of him yet. So, I think they have enough offensive weapon. And then Bijan, you got to add him in there because he catches the ball out of the backfield as well. So if you're the Atlanta Falcons, right, you're at number 8. Could this potentially be a spot where you take, the first defensive player off the board? I mocked them having Dallas Turner. I think he makes a lot of sense in Raheem Morris's defense, right? Because he asked the outside linebackers to drop. And of all the guys that are the top 3, because we always talk about tiers, Latu, Jared Verse, Dallas Turner's the best athlete out of all of them. And he dropped more than all of them in college as well. So I think it's just a perfect fit. And if you're, the Atlanta Falcons, could you just move back 2 spots and gain a pick, whether it's a 4th and a 6th or even a 3rd round pick? I think it makes a lot of sense for them to at least hear what the Jets have to say. And you would be taking a strength away from the Chicago Bears if they were to try to take one of those three receivers, because they're all like mind games like that, because Chicago, Atlanta, both in the NFC side are going to be vying for a playoff spot. We saw what the Patriots did to the Jets just last year, right? Right? They gave away they traded back in the first round to the Pittsburgh Steelers to take an offensive tackle that the Jets could have potentially have taken, right? Just one pick ahead. So there's little games like that played in the draft. So I think Joe Douglas, as the board falls, and if it falls like that and one of the big three are there after pick 7, I think he gets aggressive and calls Atlanta and see what it would take just to move back 2 spots. Now, the only thing, if you're Atlanta, you probably worry about the Chicago Bears potentially taking your guy at 9, because they need an edge rusher as well, right? We saw what Montez Sweat did to kind of transform that defense. Just imagine if he had another mate on the other side. Now, this is where you got to think, if you're the Atlanta Falcons, though, you got to really stick to your board. And if Dallas Turner isn't that far behind Jared Verse or Latu, then you're comfortable with that decision, right? But if Dallas Turner, say, is 5 or 6 spots ahead of them, that's where it could get iffy, right? And Atlanta might try to fleece a little bit more out of you to move up just those 2 spots.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page as you. I think that the draft starts at 4 in the sense of, for the Jets, in terms of after pick 4, you start to say, okay, now we got to really watch the board, right? I mean, look, New England could go Marvin Harrison, and I get it. I get
one
why
mock,
they
I
would.
Definitely have them taking
Yeah,
him.
that's what I'm saying. I get it. I get it. But if they go quarterback, and a lot of people assume it could be 4 in a row, Arizona's probably they could trade back. They can do whatever they want. They're kind of in a spot. Yeah. They have no pressure. It's a younger staff in terms of years being there. They still need so much help that you could argue, hey, just trade back to 10 or whatever and pick up an extra first, and you kind of keep buying yourself time. The Chargers team feel like a team that just should trade back. The way the Ravens, you're coming from a Ravens system and a Jim Harbaugh mixed system where it's accumulate picks, it's trusting your board, it's building inside out, all these different things. As much as they need a receiver, I get it. I also think they need offensive line help. They need a ton of defensive help. They need all these different things where, hey, is it worth them, giving up, X, Y, and Z picks? Let's just say, one of the receivers is gone, but, is Malik Neighbors making them that much better than potentially, 3 or 4 picks? Maybe. I love Malik Neighbors, but I don't know. Jim Harbaugh has been on a
man's explosive. I don't know.
I know. This is why I wanted to get to, because Jim Harbaugh's talked a lot about that. There's obviously the relationship there with some, Chad Alexander and Joe Ortiz and Joe Douglas know each other, obviously, and things of that nature. Could the Jets go all the way up to 5? You mentioned 7. I agree there. I agree with 7. It would take a lot. It probably takes your 2025 1, which, as crazy as it is, the Jets have done a lot of hey, they give a 2026 3 that can become a 2, because did they continue to try to just go all in this year? Pick 8 you mentioned is a big one. Who I know, obviously, we assume Marv will be gone. I think that's pretty much the assumption by 5. If he's not gone, maybe it's a different conversation.
If he's not gone by 5, it's a great conversation.
It's a great conversation. Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors are 2 guys who are special prospects, in my opinion. I know how high you are on Rome. Yeah. If you could trade up for 1, which one are you trading up for? And which one, I guess, is a better fit for the Jets? Because, again, Malik might be a better fit for the Giants, who don't have that type of player.
Correct.
Where the Jets kind of do have that type of player in some sense. Not really, but in some senses. But maybe a Rome Odunze becoming Mike Williams in a year is a pretty good situation.
I mean, you stated it plain and simple. I think Rome Odunze fits better with the Jets than Malik Neighbors would. Not that Malik Neighbors wouldn't fit. The thing is, when you have somebody with that much talent, it's your job as offensive coordinator to figure out ways to get them the ball, right? But when you look at what Rome will allow the Jets to do, Mike Williams is coming off an ACL. It would allow him not to rush to try to come back too early, right? Because so many players do that. And you got to think Mike Williams getting Rome may bring some pressure on him, but not having Rome, I think, is going to give him even more pressure to come back, because Garrett Wilson told you plain and simple after the season, what happened last year can't happen this year. I need some help. He literally hit you with the Kevin Hart meme. Help me. Please help me. So, what Rome will allow Garrett Wilson to do is to slide into the slot more, and that's where he's been so efficient. And it would take the safety over the top that Garrett Wilson was seeing a lot of times when he did motion, or whether he was in the slot. it would take him away because Rome's catch radius is so crazy that if you allow him to go one-on-one on the outside, it's not 50-50 jump ball. It's more 70-30 he's coming down with the football. He's that special of a player with the football in the air. So I think he fits perfectly, one, because it doesn't rush Mike Williams back. But just imagine when like week 7 or 8, when all three of those guys are together, like who are you guarding? And you know who's going to help the most, Will? Brees Hall. Like you're not going to you're not going to be allowed to have a heavy box with that receiving core out there for the Jets because Aaron Rodgers will pick you apart. Literally. If you try to go man coverage with Mike Williams and Rome Odunze and then Garrett Wilson in the slot, good luck. Good luck to you. Like, good luck. So for the one person that's going to help the most is Brees Hall. Like we saw him have right at 1,600 all-purpose yards. Just imagine what a light box, what Brees Hall can do. Like, goodness gracious.
Look, I think the combination of the offensive line improvements, the improvements in weapons, and obviously the improvement in quarterback. I said to Jason McCourty on 2 weeks ago's episode, if he's a top 5 finisher and offensive player of the year, I don't think that's a hot take. I actually think it's probably a safe bet. Obviously along with the Tyreek Hills of the world, the guys that you expect to be up there no matter what. But obviously outside the top 3 receivers, I truly think that is option number 1, and it should be option 1. The debate, I think, is really around if you stay at 10 and or in a slight trade back, what happens? Because there's arguments for, do you take Fashanu or Talise Fuaga or Fontenot, out of Washington, guys like that, even a J.C. Latham, or can step in and either be depth this year and your future left or right tackle, depending on the prospect. Fontenot, who Connor Rogers has said this before, like there's no reason he can't go and beat out John Simpson in camp for the left guard spot right away and say, hey, like these guys are not on, Rich said this last week. It's not like Moses and Simpson are on $20 million a year deals where they can't be replaced.
Yeah.
That, and then there's Brock Bowers, right, who Joe Douglas kind of referred to as there's a tight end in the draft that's switched Army knife and all this different stuff. The fan base is so up in arms if you like him. You're a Bauer sexual. I got called on Twitter for saying he's a good prospect. Then you have guys that don't like Bowers, that have Kyle Brady PTSD and all these different things. I guess where do you stand on that offensive line Bowers debate? Because I'll even throw Brian Thomas Jr. in there. He's probably a slight reach at 10, but he's the only other option I would think is a pass catcher that could be in play at 10.
Yeah, so when you look at it, I just think, and you stated it perfectly, just because Morgan Moses was traded for, John Simpson was paid for. Like, if you look at their deals, essentially those are kind of like swing guy type deals. Like your swing tackle, your swing guard, they're making $5 or $6 million, and some are making even more. So, like, I don't think Joe Douglas would be opposed to drafting an offensive lineman, more specifically a tackle that has the versatility like a Talise Fuaga. And if he beats Morgan Moses out in camp, then Morgan Moses is the swing guy. Let's not forget, when Morgan first came in 21, that's essentially what his role was going to be. He was going to be the swing guy, right? But then, Mekhi Becton got hurt, so he had to start. So I think hopefully there's been some honest, conversations, depending on what the Jets actually do at 10. They probably haven't had a conversation with Morgan yet because they don't want to let out what they could potentially do at 10. But I would hope, like, before they make the pick, or even after they make the pick, they have, a real talk with Morgan Moses and let them know, like, yeah, it's probably going to be a competition thing. Should you win out, you'll start. But if not, we're going to depend on you because one thing we know for sure, our swing guy is going to play this year, right? Because that's just football. Like your swing tackle is most likely going to play 3 or 4, maybe even up to 6 games or not more, depending on what happens in the offensive line. And then you look at John Simpson, right? I think he's making around $6 million. Like that, again, good money for like a swing guy or even a low-end starter at guard in this league. So I don't think they're opposed to if Fuaga comes in, if they were to pick him at 10 and he beats out Simpson, him starting over him. Now, another thing is you just want to get depth too. Now, again, I know people will say this is an all-in year and taking a swing out of offensive lineman may not be that smart. But if the draft board falls like that and the top 3 are gone, why would you not rectify an issue on the offensive line? We saw that the depth has been a struggle for the Jets the last few years, right? So the only thing is trading back, Will, when I look at the board and I look at the teams that could potentially come up, like who are they going to be essentially coming up for? Because the offensive tackle group is so deep. Like one could just fall in your lap. Like unless you're like truly in love with somebody, the Jets could potentially be pigeonholed at 10 and not be able to
Yeah.
move, right?
I think
Unless a
it's just the
quarterback falls.
quarterbacks.
Like,
Yeah, it's just
yeah,
if
unless a quarterback
does someone
falls.
get desperate for Penix? Does someone get desperate for Bo Nix and say Denver, Vegas,
Or if JJ
Minnesota?
McCarthy slides past 6.
Yeah, which JJ is the most. I think JJ will turn the draft. I really feel
For
like
sure.
because if
Depends
he
on where he
goes top
goes.
four, if he goes top four, the Jets' chances of
Oh, it'd be
either
great.
it's be great for the Jets. Like they really
Yeah.
need 4 quarterbacks to go before them because then it either puts an incentive on, hey, Denver's got to jump Minnesota because they couldn't get up, or uh, Vegas wants to jump Denver and Minnesota to go to the Jets, and the Jets get an extra 3rd-round pick or whatever it is.
Correct.
What do you make of Bowers? Because like best
Yeah.
player in the Georgia offense at 19 years old and all this different stuff, but again, kind of quote unquote undersized, a lot of yak yardage in college, but like pretty blue chip prospect. Like I don't know what to
Yeah.
make of the discourse is just it's so hard to figure out. He's one of the it's like it's one of those guys where they come out and like I don't know if we just get bored of the prospect. I think we've seen this a little bit with Marv too, where these guys have been in the spotlight for so long that
Correct.
you
I'm
can
saying you
create,
say it with Caleb too.
yeah, Caleb too. It's like, oh, is Jaden as good as Caleb? It's like, no, man. Why don't you turn on the tape? Like,
I think it's a lot closer than people think,
yeah,
but I still give the slight edge to Caleb. When you look at Brock Bowers, and I'm going to preference this, Will, by saying, because people think I don't like Brock Bowers. Like, I think he's a hell of a player. Like, a hell of a player. He literally single-handedly beat Auburn by himself in that game. Like, they were down that game, and he literally went, Super Saiyan like 6 in that game in the second half. Like, he went Super Saiyan God is what he went in that second half versus Auburn. I mean, the body control to catch the ball. We talked about the yak, the yards after catch, the ability to separate too, right? The explosiveness. I love all that. The only thing is people will say, you can't visualize him as a tight end, but I'm like, that's what he plays. So what do you mean I can't visualize him as a tight end? Well, we've had this discussion about another guy that they were saying this about, Kyle Pitts in Atlanta. They said the same thing about him. The thing is, when you take a guy like a Kyle Pitts, a Vernon Davis, or Brock Bowers in the top 10, when you talk about positional value, which is a real thing, like you have to have a set game plan for that player to succeed. Because say Brock Bowers does go top 10, he does go to the Jets, say he has 600 yards, people are going to say that's a bust taking him in the top 10, right? When he's only a rookie. So you're setting the kid up to fail. My thing is, I kind of compared him to Dalton Kincaid, and people got after me. They're like, oh, he's more explosive in this. I'm like, well, Dalton Kincaid, like, I wasn't as high on him as a lot of people were. But one thing I knew he could do was go up and get the ball and separate and be an issue in the middle of the field, just like Brock Bowers can do. And where did he go, Will? He went at the back of the first round, where I think tight ends should essentially go, right? If you just look at the history. And then, like, he had a really good season. He had 73 catches, Will. Just imagine if Brock Bowers had those numbers at number 10. People would still say that wasn't enough because
yeah,
he was the
no,
number 10 overall pick.